The Cyclops, a people of brutal man-eating giants, aren't they? Well, not so much. If that's what you think too, we're about to discover that, in fact, they are a people descended from the gods, exceptional blacksmiths and great builders, but also a people turned savage and anthropophagus, whom Ulysses will meet. Imposing creatures, much larger than a man, Cyclops are known for having only one eye in the middle of their foreheads. They're also much stronger. But how could such creatures be brought to life? This is already the third video in the Saga Spectrum channel, and as in my video on Medusa or that of the Minotaur, when there's a mythological creature, the gods are never far away. In fact, Cyclops were originally very different from the primitive people described in Homer's Odyssey. Indeed, if you study Greek mythology, you'll find that the Cyclops play very different roles in the various myths, and you might even be forgiven for thinking that they are totally different creatures, given the differences between them. Chronologically speaking, however, the oldest Cyclops are the Uranian Cyclops. Hesiod was the first to mention them in his texts. Children of Uranus and Gaia, they are three in number: Brontes, Steropes, and Arges. This makes them the brothers of the Titans and the Hundred-Handers. These three brothers are so powerful that their father, Uranus, locks them in Tartarus for fear of their strength. Cronus, their brother, frees them to help him overthrow Uranus. The plan worked perfectly, and not content with defeating his father, Cronus emasculated him. But now the Cyclopes have proved their prowess, and Cronus, now king of the Titans, fears he too will be overthrown by his fearsome Cyclopean brothers. So he sends them back to Tartarus. Of course, this is only a hypothesis, but perhaps this was Kronos' mistake. He turned three of his best allies, eternally indebted for their liberation, into prisoners with a grudge against him. Zeus, about whom I'll definitely have to make a video one day, freed the three Cyclops once again so that they could help him defeat Cronus. Grateful for their newfound freedom, the Cyclops made him the Thunderbolt, the mythical weapon that enabled him to become master of the universe. The manufacturing process is very simple. Brontes is said to have added the storm to the weapon, Arges the glow, and Steropes the lightning. Following the success of this production, the Cyclops continued their work, forging the trident of Poseidon, the bow of Artemis, and the helmet of Hades, which I already mentioned in the video about Medusa. At the time, Hephaestus had not yet been born, so they were an important source of weaponry, enabling the Greek gods to triumph over the Titans once and for all. Thereafter, the god of the forge took his rightful place, and the Cyclops became his assistants. Unfortunately for them, tragic events put an end to their work. Asclepius, son of Apollo, came into possession of the Gorgon's blood, which was given to him by Athena. This blood is known for its healing properties, and Asclepios attempts to bring the dead back to life. This transgression of the natural cycle sends Zeus into a rage, and he strikes down poor Asclepius. Having lost his own son, Apollo takes revenge by slaughtering the Cyclops, responsible for making Zeus's thunderbolt. As you can see, there's nothing savage or primitive about these gigantic blacksmiths, quite the contrary. In fact, they are peerless craftsmen, having participated in the very foundation of the Greek divine pantheon. Still far removed from the bestial image we have of these creatures, there is also mention of Cyclops builders. At a time when cranes and other means of moving huge masses of rock were underdeveloped, it was particularly useful to have at one's disposal a giant several meters tall, endowed with supernatural strength. So it was that Proetus, king of Tiryns, the birthplace of Heracles, enlisted the services of the Cyclops builders to construct his city walls. The walls of Mycenae were also attributed to them, thus becoming known as the Cyclopean walls. As you can see, these walls are made of massive, very heavy stones, which at the time were hard to imagine normal humans carrying. Throughout the ancient texts, various constructions were attributed to the Cyclops, here and there, although there was never any mention of an entirely Cyclopean civilization. However, in Homer's Odyssey, these one-eyed creatures are portrayed quite differently. In this later account, they seem to have regressed in terms of civilization, and far from building walls and marvelous weapons, are content to live by raising sheep. Oh, and devouring the men they meet too. The best-known representative of these creatures is Polyphemus, son of Poseidon and Theusa, whom Odysseus meets when he lands with his men in what he later calls the land of the Cyclops. As we said, these giants don't fish or farm and are content to live on their island, consuming the resources that surround them. The term land is not to be taken in the sense that it would be used today, as they are in fact just a scattered, unorganized people. The Cyclops live as a family in caves, with no more developed political apparatus. Ulysses and his men land on the island and set out to explore. They find a sizable cave and decide to enter it. Imagine that. It takes courage. Their bravery seems to be rewarded, for inside the cave lies an abundance of food. What a pleasure it must have been for long-sailing sailors to come ashore on a supposedly deserted island and find more victuals than they'd seen in a long time. While this may have sounded suspicious, it's understandable that the unfortunate companions didn't deign to ask themselves any more questions than that and set about feasting. But now they find themselves in the lair of Polyphemus the Cyclops, who is about to return home. Finding the sailors enjoying his provisions, he disregards their hospitality and decides to lock them in by rolling a giant stone into the cave entrance. After all, it's understandable, as I don't think anyone would want to discover someone looting their pantry on their way home from work. What follows, however, is more disturbing. Cyclops are anthropophagous. So it was that Polyphemus returned in the evening to devour two of Odysseus's companions. The poor men were trapped, unable to escape, and facing a creature too powerful for them. Unable to find a stratagem that would get them out of there quickly enough, Polyphemus returned the next morning to devour two unfortunate sailors. Let's face it, the sailors had become the Cyclops' larder, and this was definitely not a situation for the future. It was time to escape. But how? Imagine being trapped, with a voracious and fearsome creature coming to devour members of your group on a regular basis and not knowing who would be next. It's a mind-bending experience. But that's exactly what you don't want to happen, because if force isn't the answer, then you'll have to resort to cunning. So Odysseus made the Cyclops drink a large quantity of wine. This enabled him to lower his guard. The giant, drinking the beverage served to him, asks the man serving him his name. The man replies that his name is Nobody. A funny name, but obviously not enough to make him wonder. He finishes his drink and falls asleep. Odysseus then explains the next part of the plan to his men. Now that the giant is asleep, the survivors, still trapped in the sealed cave, take a large wooden stake. They harden it with fire and drive it into Cyclops' only eye. Naturally, the pain wakes him up, and he screams and tries to take revenge on the culprits, but this is made impossible by the fact that he is now blind. His anger is in vain, as it can't fall on any of his enemies. If he can't touch them, his strength is useless. Even so, the sailors were not out of the woods, as they were still trapped in the cave, and above all, the Cyclops' howling had attracted his fellow creatures, who lived further out on the island. It was here that Odysseus's lie about his name was to bear fruit. For when his neighbors asked him what had blinded him, he replied that nobody blinded him. A reply that made little sense to the other Cyclops, who, thinking that he was now alone, without danger or captives, left him on his own again. Odysseus's men were no longer in direct danger, but they still had to get out of there. To this end, they hooked themselves under Polyphemus's sheep the next morning, as the Cyclops was about to graze them, despite his blindness. No fool. The gigantic jailer suspected that the men would try to get out at that moment and felt around on his animals' backs, but not on their bellies. So they escaped from the cave and set off again at full speed on their boat. Unfortunately, once they were safely on their ship, Ulysses taunted the Cyclops one last time, shouting his real name. Because of this, Poseidon, father of Polyphemus, cursed Ulysses and lashed out at his sailors. But that's a story for another day. So there you have it. We now know a lot more about the Cyclops, and the least we can say is that they're not just giant primitive cannibals, no. They have made and broken entire pantheons of divine creatures, armed them and built imposing walls, although it seems that time has led them to retire to an island to live off livestock. A well-deserved retirement, if you ask me. Thanks for watching this video. Like and subscribe if you liked it. And above all, don't be afraid to tell me in the comments if there's a particular topic you'd like me to cover.